I kept praying to Baba, oh, I need to come see you, I need to come see you. But he knew what he was dealing with and that I wasn't fit to go any earlier than I did because the conditions were so harsh.
This was around 1974. So basically, Kitty did go to India in 75 and came back. I started to have dreams of Baba every month, like a clock. So every month I had a dream of Baba giving me some form of information about something or other. This lasted for 23 months. I was going nuts. I got so tweaked to the point where I said to Kitty, if I have one more dream of such a Sai Baba, I'm going to see him. Sure enough, on the 24th month, I had another dream.
Oh, and the other realization is we're like a figment of his imagination. Like, yes, we are God, but a figment of God's imagination.
Yeah.
I don't think I can say anymore. What more can you say?
It was amazing.
God came here and we hung out with him.
Everybody's telling me the same thing, so I need to ask Swami what I should do. So I kneel before him in my puja. I had a puja table at the time. And I kneel before the picture, and I said to Baba, Baba, what should I do? And I'm looking straight at his picture, and so help me God. He looked at me and he said, come see me. The picture spoke to me. I didn't imagine it. He said it twice. I said, okay. Right.
How's this for an interesting and most loving trip down memory lane? The memory lane at Prasanthi Nilayam with holy man Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Three people's reflections from the 1970s of their time spent at Prasanthi Nilayam. Thanks to those who made this video possible and who sent it to Souljourns. Welcome to Souljourns. This video was recorded on February 16th, 2012.
I was raised Catholic and not a religious family. And truth be told, I was agnostic. And so that's, just to set this all up. I was a dancer, and I was working in London with Sammy Davis Jr., and I injured my knee. And I was devastated, so I came back to the U.S., and that went my career. It was over. So I didn't want to give up, and I decided I'll try to find a way to be healed. And I went to various doctors, and they didn't have acupuncture then, but I went to chiropractors and orthopedic specialists and what have you, and nobody could help me. And so then someone told me that there was a way that you could learn how to use a larger portion of your brain by going into an alpha state, and you could heal your body. And I said, that's it. That's the way to go. And it was called Silva Mind Control. So I decided I'm definitely doing this, and I tried to register for the course. And although I was agnostic, I had this little voice inside, that I used to listen to. And when I tried to register for a certain date, there were obstacles, and I couldn't register for the date that I wanted. And I just had this feeling that I was supposed to take this course the third week of August. So I heard that little voice inside, but still I said, I'll try for the second week, because the third week really isn't convenient for me. Well, of course, it didn't happen. And sure enough, I had to register for the third week in August. So now I'm thinking, okay, this means something. Something meaningful is going to happen. I just have this feeling. So I go, and the first day of the course, we're sitting there, and the instructor asked everyone to think of, what was the question? Oh, let me think a minute. Oh, he said he wanted us to make an association, and he said, think of something that you can associate with. And this man got up. His name was Raja. I didn't know at the time. He was a friend and lifelong companion of Hilda. And he got up and he said, crystal prayer beads as manifested by Sai Baba. I said, that's it. That's the clue. That's why I'm here. So when we broke for lunch, I went over to Raja and I said, could you repeat what you said? And he did. And I said, so what does that mean? So I said, would you like to have lunch with me and tell me all about this? And he said, sure. So we sat down and he started telling me stories about Sai Baba, that they called him Man of Miracles, and there was a book written by him with that name. And after he started telling me these wonderful stories about Baba in his childhood, and he performed miracles and manifestations, and then he took out a photograph. And believe it or not, I looked at the photograph and I said, oh my God, I'm looking at a picture of God. And he's not a man and he's not a woman, he's everything. Right? I mean, that's Swami's work. He's so powerful. So I didn't say anything to Raja because I thought he would think I was really ridiculous. And so I went back and I kept contemplating, and I was so thrilled and delighted. My heart was like totally full. And I said, I found God today. I found God today. I can't believe this really happened, you know? So I was like totally blissed out. And then I went back to Raja and I said, I have to know more about him. Does he have an address? I want to write to him. So he gave me Baba's address at the ashram, and he told me about the book Man of Miracles by Howard Murfitt. And I ran home, got the book, wrote a letter, and Raja told me about Hilda. I started going to Hilda classes, which were totally amazing. And that's a whole other evening's worth of stories. So anyway, I wrote a letter to Baba, and I was having problems in my family. So after reading the book Man of Miracles, I wrote to Baba. I said, they say that you're a man of miracles. If you truly are a man of miracles, then you'll be able to help me, and then I'll know that you're real. And if you don't, it's okay, you know. So I wrote this letter, and I said, I really need help with my sister and her little boy. She had just had a baby. And Donna was very sick, and I was afraid for the well-being of my nephew. She really couldn't take very good care of him. So that was my prayer. I said, please take care of my nephew. 3 days later, everything started to change. And you know when they say, be careful what you pray for? Well, things changed, but it didn't appear for the best, because what happened was my sister wound up in a hospital in a mental ward. And as a result, my parents took her child to take care of him. And then we did get her out, because that wasn't the place for her. She was sick but not mentally ill. But it was 3 days later, and like I say, everything started to change. And it's so funny because he blessed me with like instantaneous faith. It's mind-blowing. Because when this happened and I saw my sister in this place, I knew that it was him. I said, it's 3 days later, this is the answer to my letter, and I know that he's responsible, and I know that this is a good thing, not a bad thing. And it was a good thing, not a bad thing, in a lot of ways. So that was my introduction to Baba. I took some notes so that I wouldn't forget. There's so many things in so many years that, you know, there isn't time to tell everything. So then, let's see. 4 years later, I kept praying to Baba, oh, I need to come see you, I need to come see you. But he knew what he was dealing with, and that I wasn't fit to go any earlier than I did because the conditions were so harsh. You know that. You know, ox carts and what have you, and I'm not a camper, I'm, you know, like really prissy, so there was no way. So 4 years later was when I made my first trip. And what happened was I hadn't intended to go to India, but Baba's always in control. If you wind up there, he called you there. I had a vacation, and I had planned to go to Naropa Institute in Colorado, in Boulder. And the reason I was going to go there was because I wanted like rock and roll and fun and meditation. You know, I didn't want anything too serious and too intense. So I thought this would be perfect. You know, it would be like a vacation and be around spiritual people. So I booked it. I got my little meditation cushion. I was all set. I was like really happy. And then all my friends at Hilda's said to me, why are you going there? You're like so above that, you know, like you've look at the training you've had. You don't need Naropa. What are you going there for? I said, okay. So I went home, and I said, everybody's telling me the same thing, so I need to ask Swami what I should do. So I kneeled before him in my puja. I had a puja table at the time. And I kneeled before the picture, and I said to Baba, Baba, what should I do? And I'm looking straight at his picture, and so help me God. He looked at me and he said, come see me. The picture spoke to me. I didn't imagine it. He said it twice. I said, okay. Right. So I'm thinking, I don't have any money now. I paid for my tuition at Naropa. What am I going to do? So, and they said, clearly on the receipt, no refunds. So I called the next day, and they said, oh, no problem, we'll send you a refund. Everything's fine. Thank you, Baba. And so then that was my first trip to India. And that's when I met Faith. And I had my first interview. And was there anything on the way? Let me think. Hold on, I don't want to miss anything. Right, no. So anyway, I had my first interview with Swami, and it was with all women. And Swami materialized a medal for my sister, and he told me to give it to her to wear it, and he would protect her always, which he totally did. And now I'm wearing it. She passed away, but Baba helped her throughout her life. And so let's see. So that was my first trip to India. And I think that was around 1974, I believe.
August of 75.
August of 75.
Yeah.
Okay, Kitty knows. I have a terrible memory. And in this interview, it's like the materialization. I mean, that was fabulous. I want to say something about that. He raised his hand and he went like this, and he said to me, "Go like this." So I put my hands out, and he threw the medal from a distance. Maybe he was sitting like in the middle of this, and he threw it to me if you were sitting there. And the force and the energy that came with it was indescribable. It was so strange. So that was pretty mind-blowing. And then he looked at everyone in the room, and he looked into our eyes, and we were pretty close. And he said, "You are God." And then he went to the next person, and he said, "You are God." I mean, that was probably the most extraordinary thing in all the years. I mean, it was just, what can I say? Okay. Then, years later, I developed a thyroid condition. And it was so bad that it was Graves' disease, and I couldn't work, and I didn't have much money. Things were really tight. And I knew that I had to go to see Baba and that he could help me. So again, I knelt before my puja table and cried and begged and said, "Swami, I've got to see you. You've got to hear me. I've got to see you. Please make it happen." The next day, I get a phone call from Soma Krishna, Ramdas's dear friend, and she said, "Artesia, I know that you're very sick, and I think that you should go to India to see Baba, and I'll give you the money." And I said, "Thank you," and I was on my way. So then I went to India, and I don't know if you were with me that trip or not. I can't remember. But I was desperate for an interview, really desperate. And each day I would get like the most incredible darshan. He would come over to me every darshan. He was giving me love every darshan. I couldn't contain it. I just couldn't contain it. I was so full. It was unbelievable. And then and all the people that I had met there, and some people that I had known from New York, but also strangers, they knew that I was very sick, and I had all of these people praying for my interview. Jews, Christians, Hindus, everybody, just loving one another and praying for my interview. Can you believe it? And so Swami came over to me, and he said, "Put out your hand." And he waved, and he filled it up with vibhuti. And there had to be literally 3 inches of vibhuti in my hand. And when it came out, it felt like if you had a hair dryer and you were blowing on your, like putting it on your hand, it came out with that kind of strange force. So I ate all of it, and I licked my hand, and then I looked down at my hand, and the vibhuti came back on my hand. And that was, for me, that meant, I'm always with you. You are God, you are me, we're one. So that was pretty wonderful to take home. It was just incredible. Then, years later, I love this one. The thyroid left me with this protruding eye. This eye was bulging, and it looked hideous. And people would stare at me, and I really felt self-conscious about it. So I would look in the mirror and say, oh, my eye, what am I going to do? So I go to India, and before I even get there. I book a flight, I get to JFK, I present my ticket, and they said, oh, you don't have a reservation on this flight. We have no room, we're booked up. And I said, but I was totally confirmed. They said, no. So I went in the corner, and they said, well, we'll try to get you on, but it's really doubtful. But wait. So I went in the corner, and I was chanting Ganesha, and I thought, if I'm not on the plane, then there's a reason for it, and I can accept it, and that's okay. Well, 5 minutes before the plane is supposed to take off, they said, we have a seat for you. Not only did they have a seat for me, I got business class. Yes. And not only that, but I wound up sitting next to a doctor from Carolina who specialized in the type of surgery that I needed for my eye. He was on his way to India to teach other doctors how to do this. So the next several hours on the plane, I was his captive audience, and he was so sweet and so kind. He explained the surgery, he assured me that it could be done, and he said, don't worry, and everything, right? So then I go to India, and you were there, because we had an interview together, a personal interview. So I'm in India.
I don't remember at the airport.
No, we didn't fly together. That's why.
But we checked in together because
Somehow,
both of
yeah.
our passports had the same exact date.
Oh,
at the end.
okay. Wow, she remembers that? Gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm in the interview room, and what do you think Swami says to me? He says to me, why do you worry? You're always worrying. I take care of you. Don't worry. He said, you look in the mirror every day, and you say, my eye, my eye. He said, don't worry, I'm taking care of you. Oh, God. Can you believe it? Oh, God. And, how much time am I taking up? Am I monopolizing the whole
You have
thing?
another hour.
Okay. All right, a quickie. Should I tell a quickie?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. A Shirdi Sai Baba story. So another trip at the ashram, I had this horrible nightmare, and I woke up, and I ran to the prayer hall because I needed to feel secure. So I ran to the prayer hall just to sit there in that vibration, and I find myself in a group of people from Kerala celebrating Onam. So a woman next to me turned to me and she said something, and I said, English? And she said, oh no. She said, we're from Kerala. This is only from people from Kerala to celebrate Onam. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. So I was about to get up and leave, and the woman on my right said, stay where you are. If you're here, you're supposed to be here. Swami wants you here. I said, okay. So a few minutes later, Swami comes out, and we started talking to each other, and she said, this is my first trip to see Sathya Sai Baba. She said, I was a devotee of Shirdi, and my friend used to massage Shirdi's feet, and he's in a lot of books. They talk about him, and I'm saying, okay, this is really cool. And I had heard that Baba was incarnated from Shirdi, but I never really gave it much thought, So anyway, so then Baba comes in and starts giving darshan. And he had this little cute plastic bag. Remember those little plastic bags with the vibhuti in it? Oh, it was so cute. So he's throwing lots of packets in everybody's lap, and he comes over to me, and I'm like, now I'm feeling totally guilty. I shouldn't be here. I better not look at him. He's going to throw me out. I'm going to be humiliated. So instead, he comes over and he gives me this huge pile of vibhuti in my lap. And I looked up and he gives me this smile, and I thought I was going to die. Then he goes to the lady next to me and he says, he calls her by her name. He says, hello, I forget her name. I'm so glad to see you, that you came to see me as Sathya Sai Baba in this life, la la la. And he puts his hand on her head and he says, I will cure your diabetes. Boom. That was just wonderful. Oh God. I think I could end with that maybe. Yeah, that's not a bad one. Okay.
Let me just say that the three of us are intrinsically connected, as we all are, but we particularly, the three, I think why we're sitting here, is because there are two lineages, I guess, for New York or Baba people from an early start. One was, I think Faith brought it up, it was Hilda Charlton and then Indra Devi. So obviously being in New York, that's how we all met. I met Artesia at the Hilda Charlton meeting, and I knew Kitty before. So Kitty went to the Hilda meetings, and she is one of the kind of inspirations as to why, after going to India in 1971, unbeknownst to me, I left New York for 2 weeks and came back 2 years later. So that's my introduction to being called to India on a spiritual call, but not knowing that I'd wind up in India. That's how that started. I also come from a Jewish family, but not religious. They did celebrate holidays. We are a kind of extended family group. You know, dinners were important, celebrating. So when I started to travel, I went through Europe. I wound up in Israel, and it was a world that I was introduced to at a young age. I was 22 years old. Ironically, the day I left was Baba's birthday, unbeknownst to me. So I knew Kitty in 1969. I met Artesia in 1974. So the way it went was I left with 60 pounds of luggage. I had a friend in the fashion business at the time, and he said, he was a good friend, he was going to Italy to do modeling, and he said, take all your clothes and fabulous, and we had a little party at the airport. I lost him and just kept traveling. When I hit somewhere around Israel, I got on a kibbutz, which is a community kind of environment, not unsimilar in many ways to an ashram. And I started to like this. I thought, you know, there's people from all cultures, all religions, offering their time to work communally. And I needed to save money as well, so that's how, you know, these little tricks. But from Israel, I went to Cyprus, I went to Turkey, up the whole coastline, and I hit Istanbul. So this is Istanbul in 1972. And it was the gateway to the East. And of course, they had a lot of coffee shops. I was a young person that went to art school in New York City, art and design. So, you know, I had that, like I think we all did, of the 60s, that flair for a little too much fun, maybe trickles of drugs and things like that. So that was the nature of folks who lived through the 60s and on. I get to Istanbul, and I see this one American white lady who had orange hair and a myriad of colors, and she came into a coffee shop. I said, wow, where are you from? And she said, oh, I just came from India, like wide-eyed, and I thought, India. So this adventurous side of me, which I didn't really know I had, and I had worked in the real estate business in New York, like around 68. I had saved a lot of good money from working hard as a rental agent before there were high-rise buildings on 86th Street in Manhattan. So by the time I get to think about this, I'm buying a ticket to go overland, single lady, Caucasian-looking, and I meet these two girls that were traveling. They happen to be sisters from Canada. We go overland into places now that are war-torn, i.e. Afghanistan, Iran. And I I met Sufis, I met whirling dervishes. I just got enamored, whether it was Israel with all the three main religions of that area, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. I saw everything in Israel. As I started going through these Islamic countries, Pakistan, I was enamored. I thought, this is just a world that I didn't even know existed. By the time I hit Pakistan, it was about 4.5, 5 months later. There were caravans of Western folks of the 60s going back and forth, many of which were drug-related type travels. I didn't have that much of a disposition for it, but, I was adventurous, so I would, it wasn't what I really thought was really great. And people invited me in, simple people from Afghanistan, to eat. I was eating meat at the time, and I got deathly sick. I had amoebic dysentery. By the time I hit Pakistan, and I'm there for a couple of months also, I check into a hospital to get a checkup because I was already starting to show signs of amoebic dysentery, and the doctor says to me, you have to be hospitalized. You have to stay here. You cannot, you're sick. And something said to me, I cannot die here. I have to die in India. So I enter into India. There was the only war between Pakistan and India in that year. It lasted one day. I'm in the airport. I'm waiting to get into Amritsar, which is kind of like the Holy Land for the Sikhs. This is a whole new, panacea of adventure. Luckily, I'm adventurous, and I hit Amritsar. It's about 115 in the shade. It's July. I don't have to say. Even New York is vicious in the summertime here, but Amritsar was very hot. I was with the two friends of mine. They were Canadian sisters, like I had said. I went into a hospital, and the doctor said to me, you need to go to the Himalayas to get healed. It could have been the delicatessen around the corner. It's the same, what? He said, the Himalayas. You don't know what that is? I said, no. He said, that's our sacred mountains. So we get on a bus for 3 days. We choose a destination called Dalhousie, which was like 14,000 feet up in the air. We go by bus. And I don't have to tell you about local buses if nobody ever went to India, but it could be South America, it could be anywhere. It was very rural. And I kept saying to myself, oh my God, this place, all these places look so familiar. I just had that natural feeling of comfort, warmth, and I enjoyed all people from all religion. So I get there, and we get off the bus, and there is a Tibetan monk standing right at the door. I wouldn't know a Tibetan monk if I fell over one at the time. So he said to me in English, do you have anywhere to stay? I said, no, we just got here. And I was like shocked. He looked like Mary Poppins. He had red shoes and the big gown of purple. So off we went to a Buddhist Tibetan monastery because the Buddhists were taken in by India, very fortunately, in 1959. So again, culturally, I just hit it off with the Tibetans. It was just, they felt like family. So we lived in a Tibetan monastery up in Dalhousie, and I studied Tibetanism, and I was up there for many, many months, and it was just gorgeous. Then I got hospitalized in a Catholic missionary, the Sisters of Jesus from Belgium. This Mother Superior said, you're very sick, you will be with me. So I could have been dead, basically. And
Baba wanted you to
Baba
see
wanted to see me. So she saved me. She really did. She gave me a treatment of 2 weeks. She sang gorgeous spiritual songs. Just something that if I went to see a movie, I'd be crying also. Anyway, she cured me, and she said, God loves you, Rosie, and I do, and I'm your mother, and Jesus loves you, and Mary loves you, and we love you. I said to her, Mother Superior, I'm going to send you money. She said, no, no money. That is our love to you. But I did send her money because she ran a small missionary up there. Anyway, I traveled for 1 year with Goenka, who was teaching Vipassana. The Hislaps went to Burma, and I was very big on studying with Goenka, who had just came up to that mountaintop to do a first class in English. So I moved all over India with him, and I saw Baba everywhere, in photos, in windows, in New Delhi. Anywhere I went, there was Baba. I kept saying to myself, who's that? Michael Jackson? Angela Davis of the time was a black activist. I just couldn't, I kept saying to a couple of people, who is this? I keep seeing him, and I see him here, and then they said, oh, you don't know who that is? Sathya Sai Baba. Of course, at the time, I was not into any form of spirituality. But I was spiritual enough to acknowledge that this is a great being. Obviously, he's all over India. Anywhere I go, he's there. So to make a story short, I get back to New York City. I go to Africa. I live in a rainforest for a couple of months. I come back 2 years later. I see Kitty, and Kitty says to me, oh, so you didn't see Sathya Sai Baba in India? I said, oh my God, here's his name again. So she took me to the Hilda Charlton meeting, and of course, Hilda at that time had pictures of all the great sages and saints and Baba and everybody. And I had missed people of spiritual sameness. There was no center at the time, and this was around 1974. So basically, Kitty did go to India in 75 and came back. I started to have dreams of Baba every month, like a clock. So I was thick-headed, of course, because he's gonna, he says he has to pulverize some rocks harder than others. So every month I had a dream of Baba giving me some form of information about something or other. This lasted for 23 months. I was going nuts. I wasn't interested yet, but I got so tweaked to the point where I said to Kitty, if I have one more dream of Sathya Sai Baba, I'm going to see him. Sure enough, on the 24th month, I had another dream. Kitty had come back. She had gone through a lot of different changes, which she'll talk about, and off we go. It's 76, and I'm sitting there, and Baba comes out in Bangalore at the time. Very few people in the sense of today's standards, front line and maybe a second line, and on a busy day, that was the way it was throughout the 70s. I'm gathering from my 70s, which I went every year through the 70s, and he did walk out, and I see, over his head, and I'm not this type, I saw the sun around him that was so bright. I saw that it didn't look like he walked, he floated. And he walked over to Kitty and I.
And I went like this.
And she's nervous, and I'm sitting there in my very most Buddhist centered, and I keep hearing, this is why the thing that I wrote about myself, this was not my voice. This is someone near and dear, somebody you've always known. And it started going like a broken record. I said, this is not my consciousness. This is someone near and dear, somebody you've always known. My heart starts going like this. She's getting crazier and going like this, and I'm sitting like this, and he's walking, and all these things are going on. And he said, oh, so you finally have come. So dealing with his omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence. How could he not? He knows everybody, but he pretends like, or in darshans, he'll never look at you like, who are you? Things like that. And and he said New York City, Hilda Charlton. So if I was going to be really disbelieving, he wanted to make an impression. Do you know what I mean? I mean, how much more can you be omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent? Because nobody, I realized, and then, you know, Kitty had her own thing, and that trip, I did not stay, but I had wanderlust, so I wanted to go to Nepal because
We
of
had
Tibetans.
Christmas dinner with him.
We had Christmas
Sit down.
Christmas dinner with the college boys. Elsie Cowan had just opened up the school, and he invited all the Western folks for a Christmas dinner. And there's Baba in his ultimate welcoming and as parenting or godly as you can say, just bending over and serving each one of us. Eat, how are you, this and that, to the college boys and us. And I think there were like 20 people of Western or European or descent. So that was shocking. You don't realize at the time, of any time, I think, it doesn't matter what year you've gone there or not, that we can't take things for you know, like I never thought Baba would leave the planet, or I didn't think that this whole visiting him and having like almost like a carte blanche kind of thing would end. And things have to, you know, you have to learn that I didn't struggle anymore, but when he passed, what was I thinking? I was thinking, I didn't think about the calendar, the lunar calendar, I was thinking the sun calendar. And I'm calculating, oh, Baba's going to be on the planet X more years. You know, so the physical body that he encases is not just that, because he's more than that. And because the way I started out, there was no way that I was interested in a physical form of a Sathya Sai Baba. I went every year, all throughout the 70s through the 80s. And then, you know, I've been there like maybe 14 times in all the years that I've been going to India. I've had, you know, amazing contact, I think, in any direction that we can all have contact. I've had a lot of personal conversations with Swami. Of course, he says the reason why I've come is because we are Atmas. He's come to take us, to understand that we are really not caterpillars, we're butterflies. He sees that, we don't. He sees that and tells us we are God, but we don't believe that. So he is the perfect reflection of what we are, even if we're not believing that. And he constantly reinforces this. He said, listen to everything I say, and I will give you great peace of mind. That's not just an interview. I went and got that Sananta Sarati, the first trip, and that was a visit from Baba. Every month in my mailbox, that's Sananta Sarati. I relished it, I ate it, studied, and I felt Baba, and I felt peace, and I felt happy. Anything that he says or writes, he will infuse into you content and peace and happiness. That's what he said. And I take everything that his words as actual, no question about it. There's nothing to question. But anyway, my mother eventually came. Kitty and I were in that interview. We had an amazing experience, just Kitty and I, another girlfriend who just passed, and this mother and daughter and my mom. And that was an exciting trip. She wanted to find out her own spirituality because she saw changes in myself. And she said to Baba, why is it that everybody in this room, which was a few people, see you as God and I don't? He said, when you see God in you, you will see me as God. And he took her hands, and he held her hands, and he really brought her on a journey of her own spiritual, you know, awakening. And that was like my divine mother and my earth mother sitting there. So, but it goes on, but you know, I think there's just, everybody has a great story with Swami. I don't think there could be a person sitting here that doesn't have a special story with him. Whether you go there ever, never, or you went there many times, how could you not? Because he's just not, as he said, I'm not just there, I'm everywhere. So he proves it time and again through different ways. But Sai Ram, and thank you for letting me talk and share my experience. Jai Sai Ram.
Yes, I do. Okay. I was born into a Jewish family, and I had to go to Sunday school and study Judaism as a child. Later, in my late teens, I somehow had the realization that Jesus was for real. I got the inclination of Avatar. Not porno Avatar, but Avatar. And I would start praying to Jesus, not in a church, just by myself. And he would answer my prayers almost like immediately. Amazing prayers. And then later, in 1974, I started going to the Hilda Charlton meetings. When I saw the picture of Baba, I did not know that was God, and it was never announced that that was God. I thought I was seeing a master. I didn't know exactly what a master was, but there were several masters there. And by now I had already studied Paramahansa Yogananda. So a friend of mine named Joan Reggie, who I think has a center now in Queens, ran off to India in 1974. And she came back from India, and her aura was huge and gold. And I said, Joan, who did you see? Who is that? And she wouldn't answer me. And I kept asking her, who's Baba? And she wouldn't answer me. And her aura was huge, and she was beaming. So the whole year of 1974, I was praying to Jesus. You said in the Bible that if I ask you, you will take me to your Father. I want you to take me to your Father. And I was doing that every single day, like a mantra, and demanding it. And then I said, even if my karma doesn't warrant it, I want it. And then I would pray to God himself and say, if you're here, I have to meet you. I must meet you. So after I saw Joan's aura, I started making plans to go to India. And it's 37 years, probably today. It was mid-February, 37 years ago, I got there. And India Superior's sister threw a garland in my lap just before Baba came out. Her name is Vijaya. And when I saw him come out at evening darshan at Vrindavanam, there was this tiny little orange figure. And at the exact same time, from the Judaism, it said Adonai, and the Christianity, here's my father, I brought you to him. And I could also see the Shiva aspect of Baba. I'm like freaking, Shiva the destroyer. I said, he could actually annihilate me. I couldn't talk to him for, I'm sort of reliving it. I was terrified. And he went like this, have no fear, I am here, and I was terrified. And then he came to get the garland, and I wouldn't let it go. And I had a tug of war with him, right my throat. But the real truth of the garland is I've never given a gift unless it was pure, and all this bad stuff was oozing onto the garland. And he was tugging at it, tugging that bad stuff, and I said, I can't give that to him. He's the man himself. And he yanked it out of my hand. And then afterwards, all the little girls, not Faith, but the other little girls, were running up to me like I'm Jesus Christ himself because God paid so much attention to me. But I didn't explain to them what the real truth was, that he was taking badness, actually, like darkness. And and he was goofing on me. And I was terrified. He was just goofing. And a couple of weeks later came Mahashivaratri. I wasn't ready for any of this, but the other thing that I got on my first darshan was it was written, and the time, the date, and the place of anyone seeing him, it was written before we incarnated, exactly when and how we're going to meet him. Then came Mahashivaratri, and with the lingam, and my experience with that is, and the Westerners got front and center. We were like princesses. And the experience of seeing that, it was from the unmanifest to the manifest. You could actually see God spitting out of his mouth human beings. I mean, us. That was the experience. He was going from the unmanifest to the manifest, and that's how we came about. I mean, you could see the whole thing. Anyway, it took almost 5 years until I could talk to him. He tried to force me to talk to him, but I couldn't. When I finally could talk, he called us in for an interview, Christmas Day, 1979, and New Year's Day, 1980, a few days later. And he manifested a medal for me with Baba on one side and Jesus on the other, which was verifying that, yes, in fact, the prayers I asked Jesus for did come about. I mean, he did. Anyway, after that, Jesus never answered any prayers for me anymore. It was finished. And okay, so when I could talk to him, we had an interview, and so many things happened. I got permission to go traveling with him. Rosie was there. We got to fly on an airplane with him. I can't talk. Bunny. I can't talk.
You just lost your voice.
Because it comes back, it's so shocking. I couldn't talk for 5 years.
Well, Baba had invited Kitty, well, we asked permission to go on a flight. He was going to visit
Delhi,
Bombay,
Hyderabad, Madras.
There was a gentleman named Don Heath who was a really beautiful devotee of Swami's. And so when Kitty gets hydrated, she can... So he gave us permission to go on the aircraft with him. He was with Mr. Juggarao at the time, who was a big builder for him on all his main projects. And it was a very surreal experience being on an aircraft. Ironically, we wound up in... Baba and Juggarao was sitting in 2 seats, and we were in the next lane of the 5 seating. And all the time, he kept looking, are we eating?
Making sure, because we kept on like...
Oh, she's back.
No.
Just pitch hitting for her. Go ahead.
And I kept doing that. The man himself.
I was black and blue for Kitty for many years. Artesia and Kitty and I never got together at one time, but I was with Artesia once and then with Kitty many times.
Oh, and the other realization is we're like a figment of his imagination. Like, yes, we are God, but a figment of God's imagination.
Yeah.
I don't think I can say any more. What more can you say?
It was amazing.
God came here and we hung out with him. And he was goofing on us.
How are we for time? Oh, okay. Go ahead, Kitty.
What more can I talk about?
Oh, sure. You want to show photos?
I don't have photos
You
with
have
me.
photos, Artesia?
Well, I put them on a disc.
Oh, very.
Oh, you did.
Artesia's very technical, so she
I don't
can
know, I hope it comes out.
graphic design.
Yeah, that should work. No music? Okay. That's Gita. That's outside of the gate of Puttaparthi. That's what it looked like. That's Kitty. That's the boys' college. Huh? Yeah. Oh, and that's Brindavan. And that's Brindavan. And you see how many people there are? There's nobody there practically. That's Brindavan, and that's the boys' college. Yeah, we're under the tree. It was like a pandal and a tree in the middle. That went a little fast, okay. That's it. There's no more. Yeah, that's all I had. These are the only photos I had, unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah, they hadn't even finished painting the college, the building. Siren.
Questions?
Okay.
Question for Rosie.
Yes.
You shared the incredible moment with your mother.
Yes.
And could you please tell me the after the darshan? What was how the experience has been with your
Well,
mom?
my mother to date is still Baba devotee. She talks to Baba every single night. I gave her a little photo that had one time given a little vibhuti. It's all written out and torn. So, but she,
Oh, microphone.
Was that the one with the booty thing?
yes, there was vibhuti at one time. My father is not alive. But when my mother came back, my mother said, oh, Sai Baba was incredible. And so in order for Baba to impress upon my dad, he sent vibhuti in a poster in front of my father's eyes, and then my father would say, well, who am I to say? If Sai Baba wants to look after my family, I like that. How could he not? Because how could you refute vibhuti coming? But my mother became much more peaceful. Not that she wasn't, but she had an inner content feeling, and she always looked for Baba in her prayers to help anybody that asked for prayer and stuff like that. And she's gone to a few meetings. She lives in Florida. She's 88. He told her not to smoke cigarettes, but she's rebellious like everybody else. At 88, she's still smoking. He said, I will help you give up your cigarettes on the darshan line.
No, in the interview.
In the interview.
Because she asked him to.
Oh, yes. So, but my mother listened to just everything Baba told her, and he said that I will look after your whole family. He just wanted to assure her that he's omnipresent in her world. And even now, at 88, she has a Baba medal around her neck that he didn't manifest, but he blessed this medal I had made for her, and when she has bad thoughts, it burns her. It actually physically burns my mother. So she can't share these things too much with her friends. They're older Jewish ladies in Florida. I don't know, so some of she doesn't say that, but she'll call up and she says, oh, I had negative thinking, and this medallion it burnt me, and I have to stop. She stops right away. So thank you for asking about my mom.
No, actually he didn't. I found the story actually continued in New York. When I came back to New York, I was working with Rosie at her uncle's building. We were converting the co-op, and I met a handsome doctor who I started dating. And he was a student of the doctor that invented the technique that man was going to teach, and I had the inventor of the technique do the operation in New York.
You know, we're AT&T, we're all connected.
Great.
You know who.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say one thing when you were talking about your mom and how he reaches our families. My mother would never go to India, forget that. But a couple of things happened in the family that, well, first of all, between my sister and I and our behavior and things that happened, they saw that something was real. You know, they were impressed. But what he did in their home was, one time I had given my mother Rudraksha beads, and she lost them. She said they were gone. She didn't know where they were. And then all of a sudden they magically appeared in her closet. And then another time, my father went to get his jammies out of the closet. He opened the closet door and whiffs of vibhuti come out of the closet. So he did like little things like that, and they said, "Oh my God, yeah." It's funny how he works in mysterious ways. Any more questions? Okay.
Maybe we can just share a reflection of last aspect. So she knows you to share it.
Oh, right, okay. Well, I think what I'd like to say is how I incorporate Swami into my life and how it hasn't changed since he dropped his body. And that is that I invite him to be with me every day. I spend my day with him. If I'm going to meet friends, I invite him along. And he's sort of like my companion and my father. And that's like the easiest thing to do. It's like, so that he's with me all the time. And I haven't found any difference since he's not with us physically, totally. And the other thing that I learned from him, he taught me at one point how to meditate with the Soham mantra. And I do that constantly. I mean, it's like, it just goes on its own, when I'm walking, when I'm doing nothing, it's there and it's constant. So those are the ways that I keep Swami in my life, and nothing has changed. Do you want to say anything about?
Say what? About what?
Oh, about, is there any difference now that Swami is not in the physical presence, or how do you incorporate him in your life?
I never thought about that. Is
Okay.
there any difference if he's here physically or not?
No. Yeah.
Well,
You want this? It really is.
I don't know. Is this on? I don't know. Because I think a great deal of my life I was looking for physical attention from God. And I'm kind of not over that yet. I mean, I have to get over it. But every day I think of Baba all day long. And from time to time do a mantra. I light a candle in the morning to his picture. I have puja at my house. I think I'm going to have to get over that huge need of physical attention, which I'd have to say I'm not.